In a violent escalation in Madagascar's capital, Antananarivo, a newly opened Chinese district was ransacked, looted, and set on fire within hours. According to local reports, on September 25th, large-scale protests led by youth erupted in the city. The protests initially focused on long-standing issues like power outages, water shortages, and inadequate public services. However, by nightfall, the situation turned violent, with looting, arson, and mass theft from local businesses. In response, the government imposed a curfew and dissolved the cabinet in an attempt to restore order.
又是非洲9月25日马达加斯加的首都
On September 25th, large-scale violent clashes broke out in Antananarivo. Shops in a local mall were looted, smashed, and set on fire, resulting in significant damage to dozens of stores. Shelves were emptied, and warehouses were ransacked. Madagascar is one of the world's poorest nations, with a large portion of its population living below the poverty line. The country struggles with a weak economic foundation, insufficient public infrastructure, and persistent issues such as social inequality, corruption, and inefficiency in governance. However, its strategic position along the Indian Ocean's trade routes has made it a key target for Chinese influence, becoming an important part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, particularly the Maritime Silk Road. China has financed multiple infrastructure projects in Madagascar, including investments in mining, agriculture, fisheries, and manufacturing. To date, China's economic aid to Madagascar through loans and grants has totaled hundreds of millions of dollars. However, like many countries involved in China's Belt and Road Initiative, Madagascar has not seen the expected benefits. Instead, the partnership has exacerbated economic dependency, created social challenges, and posed threats to national security. The country is currently grappling with political corruption, economic stagnation, and the inability to repay international debts. China's money diplomacy in Africa is not intended to enhance its global image or protect the lives and property of Chinese nationals abroad. In times of unrest, Chinese nationals frequently become primary targets, with Chinese-owned businesses often the first to be looted. The chairman of the Chinese district in Angola, Huang Yuequan, later explained that during the unrest, more than a dozen Chinese-owned shops were looted. Thieves quickly broke into the stores, emptying them within seconds. To prevent the crowds from entering the Chinese district, local Chinese residents formed volunteer defense teams, using containers and barbed wire to reinforce their defenses. The unrest was triggered in July this year, when the Angolan government reduced fuel subsidies, causing diesel prices to rise by approximately 33%. This policy directly impacted the transportation sector, particularly taxi and minibus drivers, which sparked protests. Initially, the protests began as strikes and marches within the transportation industry, but they quickly escalated into widespread unrest, including looting, property destruction, and a breakdown of public order. During the protests, videos showed several Chinese-owned retail stores being looted or damaged.
你能想象吗？在最近几个月，莫桑比克动乱已经超。
Can you imagine? In recent months, over 100 Chinese businesses in Mozambique have been looted, with robbers using police vehicles donated by China to carry out the attacks on Chinese-owned enterprises. In response, many Chinese nationals in Mozambique have fled. Prior to this, I had also seen similar incidents of Chinese businesses being targeted in other African countries. I can't help but wonder why. During periods of unrest in Africa, Chinese shops always seem to be the first to be looted. A Chinese blogger in Africa provided an analysis on why Chinese businesses and shops are often looted. There are three main reasons. First, Chinese businesses are often concentrated in the retail sector, and retail stores are frequently targeted. Second, the significant wealth gap between Chinese nationals and the local population has led to the perception that Chinese people are wealthy, making their shops prime targets for thieves. Third, many Chinese nationals tend to carry large amounts of cash, and Chinese businesses are often more vulnerable to looting because they do not hire local armed security, so it is difficult to prevent theft.
现在中国人去非洲的越来越多，给大家提个醒，在非洲偷东西啊。
In Africa, theft and robbery have long been routine, but now violent incidents, even involving injuries, have become more frequent. Just recently, in Nigeria, a Chinese national was the victim of a home robbery and was injured during the attack. In the past, African locals were somewhat cautious of Chinese people, considering them to be white-skinned foreigners. However, over time, they discovered that these yellow-skinned Chinese nationals were easy targets. Once they were attacked, they would give in without resistance. Even if the perpetrators were caught, they were often quickly released due to local protection, which led to the realization that Chinese people and their businesses were prime targets for theft. It seemed that across various African countries, there is an unspoken understanding, with incidents of looting Chinese-owned businesses happening one after another in different nations. After South Africa, it was the Democratic Republic of the Congo, followed by Angola and Niger. In Angola, locals gathered and rushed toward Chinese-owned shops in Chinese districts, with supermarkets and electronics stores often being the first to be looted. The scene was chaotic, with large crowds of men, women, and children, even as young as 10, involved in the thefts. Chinese shop owners attempted to block their store doors with trucks and hired armed security, but they were unable to stop the overwhelming force of thousands of looters. In Mozambique, a similar situation occurred following the announcement of election results, sparking riots that led to the looting and burning of hundreds of Chinese-owned businesses, including restaurants, supermarkets, and factories. Some of the looters were even dressed in military uniforms. The country has a low GDP per capita, and about 70% of residents live below the poverty line. Despite the local government taking measures to address the unrest, the losses suffered by Chinese business owners were devastating. Across Africa, these incidents continue to unfold one after another. After the Angola riots, looters swarmed Chinese businesses, and the scene was described as similar to a locust invasion, with Chinese businesses being emptied in seconds despite full security measures. The pattern of looting Chinese businesses is becoming more common, with the Democratic Republic of the Congo and South Africa as recent targets. The worst of it is in Niger, where looters are directly targeting Chinese-owned companies. In one case, a Chinese factory owner tried to block the doors with containers and hired armed security, but even that couldn't help the thousands of attackers. Small appliances and daily necessities were the first items looted, with people of all ages carrying off large bundles. It's clear that Chinese nationals must remain vigilant while abroad. Africa is in turmoil again, and Chinese-owned businesses have once again become easy targets. Countries like Angola, Mozambique, South Africa, and Zambia are now flashing warning signs. After August, Angola saw a rise in $0 shopping, with looters specifically targeting Chinese stores. The chaos left behind was staggering. Looted, smashed, and destroyed stores, with business owners facing devastating financial losses. The footage from the news paints a brutal reality. Mozambique has become even more violent, with looted Chinese-owned supermarkets becoming cash machines for the criminals, even with armored vehicles involved in the raids. Why is this happening? The social tensions have reached a boiling point, and Chinese nationals have become the most vulnerable targets as we are easy to exploit. While the unrest in South Africa may have been a natural disaster, the kidnappings of Chinese nationals are man-made tragedies, with professional criminal gangs specifically targeting us. The embassy is now urgently warning about the risk of extortion. But this isn't just an issue of poor law enforcement, it's organized and targeted predation. Chinese business owners are seen as easy prey, walking ATMs, defenseless against organized attacks. So why is it always Chinese people? The answer lies in the Chinese government's failure to protect its people abroad. Despite the grand rhetoric about defending Chinese nationals overseas, in reality, the government does nothing to support them. In fact, the Chinese government has been accused of collaborating with local criminal organizations to exploit and harm Chinese citizens for further profit. In a video, popular Chinese actor Jackie Wu passionately declares his pride. His emotional speech and the dramatic music inspired countless little patriots in China and abroad. Yet, the harsh reality is that the powerful motherland behind these displays is the true force causing immense suffering for Chinese people. The story of actor Wang Xing's rescue from Myanmar has raised pressing questions. While he was saved, what about the other 49 victims who suffered the same fate, including 2 young girls? Wang Xing was freed because of his wealth, fame, and influence. He had people advocating for him. Meanwhile, the other victims remain trapped. As the families of those still in captivity begin to speak out, the situation becomes even more alarming. Among the victims are 2 young girls, Xu Haoning and Lin Meiling, who went missing after traveling to Thailand on December 27th. Photos later emerged showing the 2 at the notorious human trafficking place, KK Park. Both girls were pretty, and the situation for them is dire. Their parents, devastated by the news, reportedly collapsed at the hospital. The families have promised to pay a ransom for their release, hoping for their safe return. But it seems that even money may not be enough to guarantee their freedom. This situation is truly shameful. In such a small, powerless country, it's alarming that nothing can be done. At this moment, China's international standing is painfully evident. There are countless others who suffer the same fate, treated like livestock with no power. It's a national disgrace. With all the boasts about advanced fighter jets and military might, what is the point if they only serve to protect the privileged few and not the safety of ordinary citizens? The key issue isn't Wang Xing's rescue. His ordeal, from being promised safety in Thailand to enduring beatings and being deceived by his traffickers from Guangdong, is merely the start. The real issue is why, when a small Chinese celebrity like Wang is kidnapped, immediate action is taken, yet hundreds of other Chinese nationals remain stranded with no help. Why is it that the criminals behind these schemes are Chinese nationals themselves, yet Chinese authorities do nothing to stop them? Why is it that when someone kidnaps us or scams us, it doesn't count as an offense against China? If there was a reality show called Escape from KK Park, how long would it take the director to pass through customs with his nationality and passport? Why don't the kidnappers target Americans instead? After all, it's said their country is increasingly weak, indifferent to human rights, and irresponsible. Why is that? If you say the Chinese government can't intervene, Wang Xing has already returned. The government can intervene but is caught in a state of inaction and action. What are the consequences of taking action, and what are the benefits of inaction? Under the focus and pressure of the international community, then Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra, although pressured by CCP, subtly indicated in several speeches that the criminal gangs behind the telecom fraud zones were largely controlled by Chinese people or Chinese capital. Some of the funding, personnel, power supply, internet access, and the mysterious source of hundreds of thousands of SIM cards from China Telecom were all linked to China. In 2024, Chinese media reported that border security had seized hundreds of thousands of Chinese SIM cards intended for use in Myanmar. This raised questions among Chinese people about where these SIM cards were coming from, as Chinese citizens are required to register their mobile numbers under the real name system. How could such a large number of SIM cards make their way to Myanmar? The IP addresses of the fraudsters making calls were primarily traced back to major cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. This has led many to question the potential connections between the criminal organizations operating in Myanmar and China's major telecom companies. Since the implementation of the real name system in China, mobile users' personal information is supposed to be controlled by the country's 3 major telecom operators. In China, if a person dials 10 to 20 unfamiliar numbers consecutively, their phone card will be blocked. To unblock it, the user must go through a complex process at the telecom operator's service center, including facial recognition, ID verification, and an explanation for the unusual activity. Yet, scam syndicates appear to use domestic SIM cards daily, making hundreds or even thousands of new calls without facing any consequences, raising suspicions that there may be a deeper connection with the Chinese government. In June 1976, Israel executed a rescue operation when Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin ordered Israeli special forces to risk everything and rescue Israeli hostages from Uganda, 4,000 kilometers away. The entire operation took just 58 minutes, and all 94 hostages were safely brought home. The leader of the team, however, lost his life during the mission. This soldier was none other than the brother of today's Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. In August 2009, two Chinese-American journalists, Ling Zhimei and Li Cheng'en, were detained by North Korea on charges of illegal entry while reporting along the China-North Korea border. They were sentenced to 12 years of hard labor, sparking intense domestic attention in the U.S. To secure their release, the U.S. Congress authorized former President Bill Clinton to travel to Pyongyang for negotiations with North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. After the meeting, North Korea announced that, on humanitarian grounds, the two journalists would be pardoned and allowed to leave with Clinton. On August 5th, the three safely returned to Los Angeles, where they were welcomed warmly by family and supporters. But when it comes to the daily looting of Chinese-owned businesses in Africa and the violence faced by Chinese nationals in Myanmar, Dubai, and other parts of the world, what has the Chinese government done? What kind of help has it provided? Those familiar with the history of the Chinese Communist Party know how it came to power. The CCP's 77-year rule has been built on bloodshed and deceit. From the Big Leap Forward to the Cultural Revolution, its rise was marked by violence, executions, and forced labor. These stories are often suppressed or distorted, leaving the true cost of the CCP's power hidden. To the CCP's privileged elite, the people are mere resources to sustain their power. For example, when the CCP first seized power, it justified the plunder of national wealth under the banner of class struggle. The law of counter-revolutionary crimes was used to label anyone opposing its ideals as a counter-revolutionary, subjecting them to imprisonment or execution. After forcefully seizing private lands under the guise of public ownership, the CCP enacted laws to protect private property. But this law only served to safeguard the stolen wealth for the ruling elite. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens' property was subjected to violent infringements, such as forced demolitions, land expropriation, and mandatory social insurance contributions. With such a government in power, how can China claim to protect its people? After China has sacrificed an estimated 60 to 80 million innocent lives and countless broken families over the decades since CCP took power, Chinese people continue to face multiple forms of exploitation and persecution, and even forced organ harvesting. Under this regime, the Chinese people are viewed as expendable resources to sustain the longevity of those in power. While the party claims to be a protector of Chinese interests, it continues to prioritize its own power and wealth, leaving the people vulnerable. How can a regime like this ever genuinely safeguard the well-being of its people?